So welcome again to our webinar series. This is webinar number 3. Our agenda for our webinar today is we'll quickly talk about Accelytics, introduce myself and Stephen, the presenters of our webinar, give our overview of the Office of the CFO and the basis for our webinar series. We'll go through our topic in detail and the problem statement. And then for this week, we're going to walk through a demo to illustrate the challenges with our topic and how we can look to solve through Anaplan. So very quickly about us, established in 2015 as an Oracle consultancy, Anaplan partnership established in 2017, maintained 100% customer referenceability. We have 3 main practices: our supply chain practice, our finance practice, and our sales performance management practice. We have over 40 tenured technology and process experts located throughout the US and Canada, and one of the highest percentage of master Anaplanners on staff. My name is Mike Newberry. I am the finance practice lead. In addition to 10 plus years I've spent in management consulting, I also spent over 15 years in finance leadership positions at several companies across different industries. So a lot of the points we talk about and we plan to talk about in our webinar series I've experienced directly, not only with our clients, but myself. Stephen?
Thanks, Mike. I'm Stephen Ganatovich. I've spent about the last 5 years working on the Anaplan platform and implementing solutions kind of far and wide. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I've done a bit in and talking about how we link that to the rest of the Anaplan ecosystem.
So quickly, our webinar series overview, a couple of points that are center or core around our discussion topics are the evolving role of the CFO that I'll touch on briefly and that I touch on every week, empowering finance teams to really deliver strategic value. And for today's topic, store planning and distribution. In our previous 2 webinars, we had discussed scenario planning for workforce and tops down, bottoms up planning. This week's topic is not, I wouldn't say, on the usual list of finance discussion points, but we chose it because it comes from an actual RFP and illustrates a different example of connected planning and how it ultimately can benefit finance and the enterprise. Some of the real world and inherent challenges that we like to point out with this one is really centered around data, spreadsheet or offline data, capture reliance. The typical problem we see in this particular area is this sort of bulletin board scheduling, because we are going to talk about a retail situation. And then a consistent topic every week is this black box technology. I'll quickly go through this. And as I talked about, this is our discussion tenets and really the center of where we're coming from. So what we see every day with our clients and what we've seen in our own backgrounds is the role of the CFO continues to evolve. It evolves from back office closing the books and producing some sort of variance reports to really a business partner delivering insights and decision support. Because of this, the Office of the CFO is continually being tasked to better leverage data for the enterprise and empower the business with real-time insights. This solving the issue of I am blind running my business and I need data to be able to proactively run my business. So therefore, the CFO really becomes a de facto lead for the digital transformation. Specific to finance leading the charge for digital transformation, most teams are really not empowered or equipped to deliver this value, even though they're being tasked to do so. Data maturity, technology immaturity, role immaturity, analytical immaturity are really inherent barriers for companies in realizing the potential of the finance function has to offer. I'll quickly expand on those things because these are where we try to present our problem statements each week and talk about it from these pillars of transformational challenges. Data, it's really many things here, but ultimately there's a struggle to capture data efficiently and effectively within operations. And there's a continued reliance on disconnected, manual, time-consuming processes. Combine that with the challenge of enabling technology, what we see so often is that the designs that were done a number of years ago are really just not nimble enough to handle the speed of change and become quickly obsolete through different events that can happen, mergers and acquisitions, restructurings, all of these things. Then getting into the analytical side of things, if you don't have data, if you don't have the right enabling technology, you're going to spend all your time doing the finance and performance, the F&P of FP&A. And so you're not going to have time to do the analytical piece. And as this shift and evolution for the CFO and their teams continues to exist, we find that a lot of times the teams really are just not prepared to make that shift overnight like they're being asked, because it really becomes a more of a culture move as we go forward. And that needs to be addressed when you're looking at any transformation. So our problem statement for today, and the topic we want to discuss, as I mentioned, was store planning and distribution. This comes from an actual RFP. So the client was seeking a technology solution that would enable its retail team to optimize scheduling by accounting for historical sales goals, leads, and promotions and scheduling of their workforce, while also providing analytics and insight that can inform the appropriateness of finance forecasts and compensation goals based on these schedules. So think of it as a lot of these things being done in a very disconnected way. I mentioned before, bulletin board scheduling for stores, data, demand planning data coming from different systems and universes, and trying to combine all that in a very manual nature to be able to forecast the business and forecast scheduling. The solution was expected to integrate with a variety of third-party systems, including but not limited to Excel, Siebel, Click Software, Cisco, and Verint. Stephen, you want to talk about the expected outcomes?
So the first concept is that really connects the enterprise. And I love this concept of Anaplan as the glue within the organization. The models function separately and everyone has their own admins over each of those models, but the ability to send information from the demand planners to the sales team to all the way down to the store level that we're going to show in our demo in a second is really, in my mind, the strength of Anaplan. The second point is data-driven staffing. So when we use the actual adjusted demand plan and layer on some forecasting ability on top of that, that sets up the ability for individuals responsible for staffing to really identify the daily and weekly staffing needs. Combine this with an ability, or with the kind of environment around COVID and what is now possible or impossible with COVID. Anaplan is really a place where that shines. The third point is workforce retention. This ability to schedule employees directly in the system that is creating the demand plan and the sales plan on top of it is really a strength here. And then ultimately it's the trust in the data. So as Mike mentioned on the last slide, the actuals came from a different place. The forecast was to be created in Anaplan. And then everyone is really using this same set of information throughout all components of the planning capabilities, whether it's demand planners or sales individuals or individuals at the store level. What we're going to go through now is an example of Anaplan really as the glue. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about an example of getting the employee roster right and situated in Anaplan and the kind of things that that enables with scenario planning. Today, we're going to build on that a bit. And in order to create the staffing plan, we need to have that employee roster right. We also need to include a demand plan to enable some of the downstream scheduling things. We're going to demonstrate today Accelytics models within the Anaplan system that are made possible by getting that employee roster and then demand plan right and correct. This is our traditional demand planning model. And we're going to pick this up really in earnest in a future webinar where we go through this model front to back. Just to give you a brief flavor on the kind of things that are possible in here, where we land here is a demand management overview. And then there are a variety of different functions in this model, from bringing in actuals to creating statistical forecasts to managing customers and products, and then adding some additional forecasting levels. The function for this, for the purposes that we're going to talk about in our staffing model, is really to get that demand right. So this is the portion, as I hit on with the last slide, This is the portion where this part of the model is where the demand planner is really going to get the demand piece right. So just going to go quickly in here to scenarios and show a comparison of two different snapshots of the actual demand plan. So here we have in here order histories, we have shipment histories, and we have point of sale history data. Whenever that scenario is chosen, that will be decided as maybe it's the current forecast or the most updated live forecast. These values here will be sent to the host of the other Anaplan environments. And it's not just the staffing model. Maybe this goes to a sales planning model, but in a situation like retail where it's so heavily reliant on demand, getting this model and this data trustworthy and right is really that starting point. So similar to like we talked about in what getting the employee module enables for scenario planning, it's the same kind of thing for demand planning and what that enables at the store level. So that's all I'm going to show in this demand planning model. Again, we're going to go through this in greater depth in a future webinar. But now I'm going to shift over just in a different tab in the same Anaplan workspace. So think of these as different Excel workbook in the same kind of macro-enabled environment, but no macros or Excel here. So where we land here is a process overview for retail scheduling optimization. And in here we have a situation that takes into account COVID and some of the retail difficulties that brought to the forefront through COVID. So here we have this, the hierarchies in here are by region. So we have region or areas rolling up to regions, rolling up to total country. And just going to walk through this model here. So what we're looking at, we have a couple different scenarios in here, and I'll show those scenarios on this adjusted store demand. So here we have this broken out by customer visits per region, customer visits, average spend, and then actual sales. So the sales number would be fed, as we hit on in the demand piece in the last model, this sales piece would be fed from that model. So we're bringing in different demands in sales, actuals and forecasts, adjusted forecasts, and then back to normal prior year actuals for reference in here. And then applying by those different regions, any other kind of forecasts that we would need to do at a more regional level on top of that. So say that we're in Pacific, which is what we're selected here. We have the sales increase driver. We want to apply this to the actual forecast that came through in order to better predict how we need to staff stores at this level. So we also have a gradual build, sales increase, and then maybe just a manual input. And we can apply these different drivers to each of the different regions as a way to layer on forecasts on top of the demand that came in from the previous model. So as we work our way through this, now we push down to actual store revenue. So started with the demand plan either at the product line or at the store level in the first model, worked our way to a regional roll up on the previous dashboard within this model. And now we're at an individual store. So working our way down to the individuals that are going to be working in these stores. And in here we have a couple different scenarios. So our first scenario is steady. So this assumes no COVID, things are back to normal, or a back to normal scenario post-vaccine. And here we're at an individual store. And if we select steady, this is no social distancing. And here in the distancing only, we applied some clearance requirements and impacts to staffing and assumptions around this as a way to impact potential lost revenue. So here we see for each of the different roles, it's checkout counter, main aisles, shopping aisles, loading dock, everything we would need at a retail store, and then some assumptions around customer to associates, area footprints, and then max occupancy for the store. So using that demand forecast to generate who is able to be in these stores in order to meet that demand forecast.
And if you think about it, here's a perfect situation related to COVID, but there also could be situations for promos or holidays or different types of things that would be specific to a store that you could model versus your typical or steady state to be able to scenario plan right in here as you need it.
So the next dashboard is the employee roster. 2 webinars ago, we talked about what getting the employee roster right in Anaplan kind of enables. So for this dashboard, for this portion, we would leverage that information of getting that employee roster right But this is really more for scheduling here. So in here, this can be a piece that the actual sales associates interact with. So they could come in and say, if I'm irons here, then I can select by each individual day, whether I can work day shift or night shift, or whether if I'm completely unavailable. We'll show in a second how an employee can actually enter PTO. But this just sets the framework for when an employee is actually available to work in an individual store. This is just a dashboard to demonstrate how an employee could enter PTO in the system. So all of this really can be linked together. So by leveraging our demand plan feeds our store level forecast, our employee roster collection creation in another model feeds this employee details here. And then an employee can come in here and fill in whatever attributes about their employee details that are required, or perhaps this even links to a source system. So how to reach these individuals, what if they're available for day or night, what their home location is, what stores they can be staffed into. Of course, this could be multiple locations if there were multiple stores that Jeremy here could go to. And then PTO hours remaining, the ability to create a new PTO request. Not going to go through that ability here of creating it, but just to click the button, it opens up this field. And then would say some selections like traveling on a plane. Is there any further need to quarantine before returning to a store? And then there's a approval functionality on top of this of, you can see here in the status, this one has been approved, and when they're eligible to return to work. All of this functions, of course, in the back end in order to create this staffing plan directly in Anaplan. So we've covered what the arrangement of the employees and when they are available to work. The next piece here is what's required in different scenarios by day. So here we have our drop down here is Sunday. So by day, based on, this could be based on footfall traffic or demand at individual stores. What is actually required at the store in order to meet that demand? So here we have this input driven. So within the distancing practices and then with a steady scenario, what's required for customer service, what's required for stockroom replenishment, and then also for pickup. So we have hours applied by each of these work zones, by the hours in the day, in order to create the staffing plan on the next dashboard. So again, this is by day, so a different pivoted view of the function, and then also the day and hour of the day where individuals are required to make the store function. And then on this final dashboard here, we've gone through creating those scenarios. We've gone through getting the employee roster right in Anaplan. And then we've also brought in a demand plan in order to meet the sales revenue goals. So Irons entered some PTO on some previous dashboards. That was a different interaction with the model. And then we select a scenario here, which scenario we're going to go with. And this is by day. So if we select, maybe things return to normal. And then we use the Anaplan optimizer in order to run this process. So this combines all of the data that we've gone through. So that demand plan, an employee's availability, the employee's PTO, the employee roster, which we went over in a previous webinar, and now down to an actual store level. Now we've gotten away from that bulletin board staffing. So now we have a suggested, based on our scenarios, weekly schedule for each employee by each individual store in order to meet the demand plan. So really holistically, top to bottom, have combined demand plan with the sales revenue targets, with some of the employee attributes and their interaction with that, and have created now a weekly schedule for employees, factoring in things like you see here Wednesday and Thursday overtime for Irons to make up for that PTO time.
Yeah, and as we discussed before, the benefits mentioned are expected outcomes connecting the enterprise, data-driven staffing, the ability to better retain your workforce and this trust in data can really be accomplished through something like this, where it's just a connection across the enterprise of a bunch of different data sources. Then you start looking towards the future and seeing, ultimately connecting this type of process from a finance perspective allows finance to have better data, which creates better forecasts for sales and the associated workforce expenses to support those sales by stores for the different scenarios that the stores are able to adjust from that original demand plan, as Stephen illustrated. In addition to that, you think about other things like variable compensation that could be tied to stores, or other data points that just make your life as a finance professional easier by just continuing to connect the enterprise and have better data to be able to forecast real time and analyze that. So each of the stores can look each week and make adjustments based on what they see and measurements they see, or reporting that's set up to they're able to see each week. So this adjusted demand forecast and scheduling just continues to get better because you have all the data in one place.
So with that, that takes us to the end of the demo here. Thank you for joining us this week. Look forward to showing you the rest of that demand planning model in a future webinar, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you.